Hi, this is my collection of paintings, my own favorite paintings, it says. Now, the first thing to remember about this is that you're looking through a video image of a photocopy of a photograph of the painting. So the main thing is that you're not really seeing the painting. The painting is made out of pigment, of course, and what you're seeing is a picture made out of light. So it's a big difference. And there's something about the materiality of a painting which resonates a certain gravitas. I just made that up. And I think there's something to that. So just remember that. But more than that, size matters. And I put all my little paintings here so that they fit into this book. But you don't get an idea what the size is. So I'll have to mention that as I go. This is my first painting as an adult, really, done back in 1974. And it shows my interest in geometry and space. And there's also an interesting juxtaposition between, you know, the symbolism of the sun, holism, unity, and the linear aspects of technology and rational thinking juxtaposed against each other. So I just hung this up for the first time since I made it in my porch. Anyway, I like that painting. I like this one too. If you look at it closely, you'll see it's like hands, my hands. This is done in Wellington, Tai Bay, where we lived, and the view out our window. And I was kind of interested in this technique I was working on, you know. You can see, and that's a bigger picture of it. That's basically the whole bay. You see, there's the airport there, and this is kind of an imaginary one. It's just trying something different. It's trying things out. This is all on paper, so it wasn't really that serious. This is the same thing, and this was done of a little photograph of that I got on a newspaper, and actually I cut out the bottom part, which I shouldn't have done, but it started to become just total graphic flat, and then it went off into 3 dimensions, into space. But I love that painting. Again, it's a yay by yay, you know. It's like 28-30 inches wide, basically. These are all on that kind of paper. Same with that. Again, same with this. And this is I like that apartment. Again, I'm using that kind of technique, painterly technique. And this is sort of a copy of the first one that I did. Just thought I'd spruce it up a bit. I like it too. And this is actually a small painting, you know, yay by yay, and again, using that same kind of technique. I like that too, actually. I do. But then I like them all. The ones I really don't like are ones like this. But I like it well enough to put in the book. I call it my sublime landscapes. But this is actually kind of a geometric idea of Picton Harbor, where I went rowing once, taking the ferry from Wellington. And then much later I did the Qu'Appelle Valley, and I like this one so much more because it's so much more dynamic and heavy-duty color and yeah, contrast. That's water there, actually. And then I did this one much later again, back in the 80s, 90s, something like that. And this is a picture. I didn't make this up. This is the way the Qu'Appelle Valley is. The Qu'Appelle River flows. I mean, it puts the meaning into meander, you might say. And this is a big painting, 6 feet wide. So it's has a presence, I'll tell you. And this is when I lived in Mount Eden in Auckland. This is the view outside our window. Same view, different way of doing it. I like them both, but I like this one particularly. It's kind of a, well, there it is. You can see what it is. And this is one of my first paintings that I did, and I don't know, something in my mind, you know. So, what does it mean? Female liberation, I think, is maybe the inspiration. I think it's just playing around. This is again playing around. This is more playing around. This is a picture I made of a bay in New Zealand, and interesting thing about this is that later on, this is just a small painting, but later on I turned this into a mural 25 feet wide in where I was teaching at Hillary College in Auckland, New Zealand. So that was pretty spectacular. Another one of my sublime landscapes. This I like more. A little heavy duty. Again. This is a new version of one of the previous paintings I showed you. A little more dynamic color and form. Picton, South Island, New Zealand. I actually was commissioned to do this painting, and I charged them by the hour, so I made a couple $100 on it. Now I'm in art school and I'm playing around with color. This is a fairly large painting. And I was interested in op art as well, and I'm very interested in Rothko, his paintings. I thought I'd try a little one myself out of acrylic, so it doesn't work at all the same way. But well enough that somebody liked it and bought it from me, so I liked it too. But I mean, and then much later, in the 90s, I guess, I was at art school and in the student lounge, and there was these things on the wall, and they had this horrible fabric with a 60s design. So on my spring break, everybody was off having fun, I was busy painting, and I painted these things, and we put them on the wall, and they're called the ratio decidendi, which is Latin for principle of the case. So it's fit into the law school very well, and of course triangle, this is the triangle, circle, and the square. You can't beat that for principles. Based on this idea that I came up with of using a lot of masking tape. Again, the alchemical circle squared idea on that side. And then I was into field painting, and they got to be big, so these are like 7 feet high by 5 feet wide, and I thought they had a big presence. I liked them, but you know, you're experimenting in those days, and what the heck do you do with a big painting like that? So some guy from Surrey in a rugby club needed to cover some walls. He took them. I never heard or seen of them or him again. This one I call Jacob's Ladder. It's again 6 feet high, and I had it in my studio for quite a long time. Above here was a labyrinth which I created, and you had to crawl through and go down into an inner sanctum, and it was all very symbolic. Later on I cut the painting up, and all I had was the ladder part, which I was walking on. That one's part of a triptych. This one has to do with an early painting, if I recall, dealing with urban encroachment of Mother Earth. And then I got into watercolor much later, but I mean, I loved that. Was the last thing I pasted into this book, but it reminds me of the Rolling Stones album Let It Bleed. I think it bled very well. And this is another circle square thing, which uses more or less construction, because it's all constructed paper and a 3D effect. This is another idea. Well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And more, oh, where am I? Yeah. Well, then I was into more expressionism, dealing with my dreams. This is me walking across to Vancouver. I consider that my alter ego. And so I was doing dream images. I won't explain what those dreams were because they're pretty crazy, but this one was my father dragging me down to work in the mine. Meanwhile, I cut this out, but there's a bunch of nubile girls picking apples in an orchard, and I was more interested in them. But nevertheless, I was dragged down.
Hey guys.
And so there we go, that's bureaucracy. More of that. This is a pretty big painting which my friend has, although eventually I painted these figures out, but I kind of like them sitting there watching the sunset, which I used to do a lot at Piet's Beach. Again, more of the same, the radiant child I'm saving. Crazy figures. A very arresting detail of a baby in a bucket from a dream. And me. And me again. This is a very painting I love, and I still have it. It's hanging on my wall outside for all to see. I did cut it off because what do you do with a painting that's 6 feet high and 5 feet wide? So I cut it off, and it has a lot of, you know, I love that African primal energy for sure. This is a Babylonian Humbaba myth. I was taken from a little picture that I had of a Babylonian sculpture, or in stone. This is again the same expressionistic symbolist view of the primal forces of nature and schizophrenic condition of man between the left brain, right brain, techno-militaristic side, and the fire coming out of the earth. That's a detail which I pasted on a eclipse of the sun. This is another detail. This is I don't consider that a self-portrait. Maybe it's a pretty scary picture. I still have it. Nobody's sure to want it. I don't even want it myself, but boy, this is me beating in a dream, beating the ground. And meanwhile, my shadow self is watching, as are these figures. I don't even know what they are. This is interesting. I was playing 20 feet, 5 feet wide, and 5 feet high, and they look like zombies, don't they? But it was like maybe a march, a protest march, that I just threw up in the cafeteria at the art school. There's that baby in the bucket there. Again. And I like that one too. That's Piet's Beach. Piet's Beach. What else can you say? This is more symbolist. It's got the alchemical idea of the house and the home as a symbol of the self. You know, the cosmic forces, the cosmic egg, and from the bottom. That's in the belfry. This is kind of interesting. This is about 5 feet high. I did this first, actually, to begin with. This is all done with telephone book paper pasted on there as a grid, and then I painted over it, and I thought, oh, it was interesting, but not interesting enough. So then I painted things out until I came up with this figure, and then I took photographs of it until I kept taking off appendages until finally it was only the head, and then I painted that out as well. But that's funny to me. This is a thing I did for a competition for a big mural on Granville Island, and I thought it would have looked pretty great on these cement pillars under the Granville Bridge, but they didn't think it was. They didn't accept it. They gave it to somebody that made this incredibly bland painting of the opposite view. I mean, there was nothing more boring than that. Whereas this sort of been so beautiful, I thought. I got this little figure from a little stick at Piet's Beach, which was an interesting creature in my book. These are more pencil crayon drawings, really. This is one of the first of that painting that I said was that I really liked. This is one of the first drawings I made, and I took it from that. This is like my anima, my would-be anima. This is my good friend Reens. He's posing for me here with a snake. You know, I was trying to do something interesting, and it didn't really work. I like this one particularly though because of the nose and the. I just made that up, but the daisies. There was a dream. That's me, my adolescent self. And then I did these as well. I call this tree borer. I made up a couple of cards out of that, so some of you might have seen them before. And that's the third one that goes with it. And this is a self-portrait. Look at that. It was done in the about 84 or so. I thought I captured myself pretty good. Chin up, I say. This is a big painting, 6 feet high. Actually, it's cut out a little bit, but yeah. Okay, I had a couple of models for that. I think I made the arms too long. My nephew's got that one. He hasn't cut it up. These when I was in Whitehorse, I did sketches. This is outside my front yard, Yukon. And the Yukon somehow inspired me quite a bit for color. Again, front yard. This is where I lived on a sheep farm, and this mountain was in the back. It was quite spectacular, the river. And I made more paintings of the Blue Mountain, I called it, you know, and get the wild wilderness Yukon feel to it, and I love that. And this is the river, Yukon River, going up north. And this is out the back of the sheep farm again. But the color is, there's something about the Yukon, you know. Boy, oh boy, you got to be there to see it. This is Cape Breton. This is a little house in Winnipeg. I think my perfect house. I think all houses should be exactly like that. And people shouldn't want more. I think it's fantastic nowadays. And a couple of churches in Duncan. I lived there for a little while. Penticton, Peachland. Peachland, not Penticton, Peachland. And the prairies. And this is my one and only. I tried watercolors. I did about 30 paintings. This is the only one that's really successful in my book. Of a piece of driftwood on the Fraser, mouth of the Fraser. But there's something about the bleeding again, and the way the contrast, everything works for me in that one. The best one. Again, that's the watercolor sketch I made earlier, that other painting. You can see a bit more to it. And this is one of my favorite little drawings. It doesn't come out so bright, but it's at the, I always forget the name of that place, on the west coast of Vancouver Island. There's a church there. And then later on, much later, this was when I was in the Yukon, and great job I had, me and a woman, we painted backdrops for this great little theater production they did in Dawson City. And this fantastic theater. So we had a lot of fun making these, and my big job was the biggest job I had was painting the mountain, and the idea of there was a big mudslide there. And this is Dawson City in the early days. So backdrop, big canvas. Okay, this is a watercolor. Actually interesting because one of the first things I did in art school when you're playing around, I found all these pieces of paper cut up in a waste paper basket. I picked them out of the garbage and I glued them all down. And I love that image. And this is what I call my glass bead game. This is another story, but a lot of symbols and interesting things that I've used in cards that I've pasted together. So it's hanging on my closet, actually. Still working on it. And there you go. This is the documentation, and that's the end of the line. Cool. So thank you very much for spending this time with me, and any comments, you know, good ones, you can always get back to me. Okay, bye.